Hello, and welcome back to the Empire Club podcast. JB, when we did our introduction in episode 0, we promised our listeners that we were going to read some of the introductory pages of the old GeoCities website that we used to chronicle our Empire Club Pulp campaign. Would you be so kind as perhaps to read to our listeners the introductory page that sort of explains what the Empire Club is?
Okay. The Empire Club was founded in the 19th century by a collection of adventurers, explorers, and soldiers of fortune as a gentleman's club. To become a member, one had to do something truly extraordinary, but be it single-handedly solving an impossible mystery, discovering a lost civilization, or pulling off a daring stunt. The original Empire Club was established in New York City by aristocratic entrepreneurs from around the globe. The international membership of the club has swelled so much that the satellite clubs have been established in nearly every major city in the world. The exploits of the members have been heralded throughout the world since the club's inception. Even the mythical fables of old pale in comparison to the amazing adventures of the Empire Club.
Fantastic. All right, so episode 1, To Steal a Corpse. So, by the way, this inaugural episode was originally run by Tom. As we mentioned, you and Tom started off round-robining the GMing duties, and Tom did the first episode. And I think that the title that he chose, To Steal a Corpse, probably, it's got the to verb a noun pattern in the title. And I think it is probably an homage to the 1952 novel by David Dodge and the 1955 Hitchcock film starring Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, To Catch a Thief. And the title of that novel and film, that was an allusion to the proverb, set a thief to catch a thief. And it's sort of a reference to the movie's plot about hiring Cary Grant's character, who is a retired cat burglar, to catch this con man who is conning or preying on this young oil heiress, played by Grace Kelly, and her mother, played by Jessie Royce Landis. It could also have been inspired by To Kill a Mockingbird, the Harper Lee novel, but I think that's less likely. I suspect that because To Catch a Thief had similar themes to what we'll see in today's episode, I think that's where maybe Tom got the
I agree with you, because our story had too few southern lawyers in it.
Fair enough.
Southern lawyers that refer to many in the story. So.
That's right. All right, so here we go. Episode 1, To Steal a Corpse. When beautiful career burglar and recent Empire Club inductee Juliette Dupont, also known as the Crimson Wraith, overheard secret agents in Paris talking about a priceless ancient treasure being held at the Egyptian embassy in New York City, she could not resist the urge to take in some culture. Sliding into the Egyptian embassy in Paris, while Egypt's King Fuad entertained renowned nightclub singer and psychic Mikara Almud, Juliette found that a trap had been laid for her by the king so that he could hire her to steal the mummified remains of the dreaded pharaoh Orthos Ra during the 1933-1934 New Year's celebration of the Empire Club, held at New York's Museum of Natural History. There, Ra's remains were to be displayed with a new Egyptology exhibit. Juliette, with the assistance of secret agent Alastair Smith-Smythe and his men, proceeded with the daring endeavor, but not before Juliette warned her American friend, professional daredevil extraordinaire Max Galahad, of her intentions. So, Juliette, of course, was Jason's player character, and this was a departure from his Germanic World War I veteran from the original incarnation of this game that we discussed in episode 0, the sort of alternate Earth version of the Empire Club that you originally ran. I guess Jason didn't want to recycle that character concept. He came up with Juliette Dupont, a.k.a. the Crimson Wraith, this world-renowned jewel thief.
Like, it was almost like a female version of the Shadow, almost a little bit, except she was more criminal than that. But yeah,
that's interesting. I guess she was. Although she didn't have the psychic abilities that the Shadow had.
That was more with
That was Mikara, or Kara, Michelle's character, who is also mentioned here. So she was the nightclub singer with the psychic abilities, and Max, of course, was your character, JB. And you talked about Max in episode 0. Now, from the Allies page of our Empire Club website, we did have an Allies page where I wrote little snippets about the NPCs, enemies, and allies. From the Allies page, I talk about this Alistair Smythe NPC that Tom created. So the snippet reads, "A secret agent of the First Order. Smythe is never without his silver cigarette case and a wry quip whenever the worst is at hand. Assigned to assist King Fuad of Egypt when he traveled abroad, he found himself working with the Crimson Wraith, Juliette Dupont, in trying to pull off the theft of the corpse of Egyptian pharaoh Orthos Ra." And the snippet goes on, but it contains spoilers about later in the story, so that's a fair place to stop. But I think that perhaps Tom was inspired in creating the Alistair Smythe NPC as he was sort of a proto-James Bond, or perhaps he was Tom's version of Mycroft Holmes, the older brother of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. Mycroft had this, as Sherlock put it, this unique government position. It's possible that he was a secret agent, and also he was the founder of the Diogenes Club, and this is another reason why I think Tom was inspired by Mycroft Holmes, because the Empire Club was a gentleman adventurers club, and so too was the Diogenes Club. Now, Conan Doyle's idea of the Diogenes Club was it was a gentleman's club for introverts, where they just went and nobody looked at each other and they just read the paper, and it was a place
it was a gentleman's club.
Yeah, it was a gentleman's club, but a place where sort of introverts could be quiet and not have to socialize. But then I think later writers who started writing in the Sherlock Holmes universe after Conan Doyle had died, they sort of transformed the Diogenes Club into this sort of affront for the British Secret Service, and it kind of retconned the idea that these mousy kind of guys go in there and they just read the newspaper and drink some booze and they don't talk to each other. To people aren't looking at each other because they're all like top secret agents. Everything's very hush hush. So I suspect that might be where Tom's inspiration came from. What do you think about all of that?
There's actually a film called the Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, which does do that, which has Mycroft being played by Christopher Lee. And they do make it very clear that Christopher Lee is a government operative, and the Diogenes Club is in fact that. It's a front for the kind of their version of the Secret Service.
Right.
That totally fits, and I'm sure Tom would have seen that film too.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm sure he would have. Yeah, and so this was the first time you played Max Galahad. What are your reminiscences about that?
That was a fun character because it relieved me of a lot of the tension of having to think about what the character would do. It was very easy to play because he just did whatever he felt was the most exciting thing at the moment. To the detriment of the safety of his friends and himself. The point was he was an adrenaline junkie, so he would just jump at the chance to just dive in. He was, the type of Leroy Jenkins kind of character who just jumped into the fray. Forget planning, which he had to kind of draw back, I think, later on. But it also made it very, very easy for me to take him out at the end of the adventure that I was playing in, to get him knocked out or captured or something, because he would end up it was just very easy for me to put him in some kind of ridiculous danger at the end,
Right.
to kind of remove him from the fray so that I could then run the game the next time.
Yeah, and I think in time,
yeah.
Tom picked up on that, and he would just sort of like, you guys would just sort of work together to get each of your characters into a position where, you would lay the red carpet down. The GM would lay the red carpet down for the player, for the player character of the other GM, and say, how are we going to get your character out of this?
I wasn't playing into it as strongly as I think I did later on, because we were just getting into it. And originally I was supposed to be running the game, and then we decided I was going to play character in the game also, since we were going to round robin GM. And so he wasn't as solid a character, if he ever got to be a real deep character. But he was. I remember he was a lot of fun to play that first episode. And kind of figure out where he was and what he was doing.
Right, and you mentioned in episode 0 that Tom was very excited about the idea of being a co-GM in this game with you. I think that the genre spoke to him. He knew a lot about the genre and the source material. So I think that it's evident. His excitement is evident by virtue of the fact that he chose to run the first episode, even though it was originally based on your Alt Earth game. But he was jazzed by the idea and took the reins there.
He had read a lot more than I'd read of that stuff, the Sax Romer type of stuff, and
right, Philip Jose Farmer. Yeah, you're right. Sax Romer, Philip Jose Farmer.
Yeah, that was all the. It's where he gets. What's the one villain? Oh, he actually has us fighting against.
Right, Wo Fang, the sort of the Fu Manchu villain.
Fu Manchu, right? But I think he actually has Fu Manchu. He mentions Fu Manchu at one point, maybe. But yeah, Wo Fang is supposed to be Fu Manchu.
Right.
I dug the idea of I think the image that I had was of a kind of buff character that walked around in a gray suit. But anytime he tried to wear that stuff, it would always look too small on him. Like he wasn't comfortable in it.
Right. I don't know if you remember this, but when we said, what actors do we imagine playing our characters, both you and Tom picked Bruce Campbell as the actor. And we were like, we can't have Bruce Campbell play, but we did anyway. We was like, what the heck?
That's why the characters hated each other so much.
The same
they recognize too much of themselves in the other.
Right. I liked I think Jason's character Juliette Dupont better than I liked his Germanic World War I vet from the original incarnation. And I'm not saying that just because I played more sessions where Jason was playing Juliette. It was roughly, it wasn't 50 sessions because we did have alternate characters, but it was scores of sessions. Whereas I only played a couple of sessions of that original incarnation of the game where he played that. But I don't think that's it. I think from the get-go, I liked the idea of the Juliette character. It seemed much more pulpy. It just seemed more of like a pulp hero than his first character idea from the Alt Earth game. She's a jewel thief. I mean, just the phrase jewel thief is pulpy in itself. That immediately brings you back to like the 30s and 40s. And, the fact that she was this blonde bombshell and a seductress, a femme fatale, that was another trope of the, more of like the noir era of pulp. But still, I really liked that character. And Juliette was sort of a schemer. And Jason, as a player, is a strategizer. And so I thought that the character much better fit him as a player. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. But I'll have to ask you later on, without spoiling too much, which one you preferred, his first character, which is Juliet, or the later character that he plays.
Yeah, it's a tough call.
I don't know if I want to go into it quite yet.
We'll get there when that character comes in. We'll have that discussion.
Nice. Yeah.
And I also would say the same thing about Michelle's character Makara. Makara was, this classy, mysterious, intelligent, well-educated woman, she had these psychic powers, but she was a nightclub singer, and there was so much of Michelle in that character. Michelle has two Ivy League degrees. Extraordinarily intelligent woman. She was working. She was working in the theater when we first met her. I don't remember exactly the position she had, but it was like sort of a stage manager.
She's a stage manager.
Right, stage manager. So she was in show business, and just she played, and she was an elegant, Michelle is an elegant woman, and Mikara was an elegant character. So again, it was the perfect. That's another reason why this whole campaign was a perfect storm, because one of the elements of that was how well the characters fit the players, which doesn't always happen. What do you think?
Exactly. I think she got into that character from the outset. She really liked it. And she was able to slip into character pretty easily, but she always liked that sort of character, the like you said, the educated, kind of not well-mannered, excuse me, kind of suave character, who could handle herself in a social situation fairly easily, and I think that appealed to her. But she got into that character and really made it her own. But again, I'm going to have to ask you later on. I mean, she kept that as her main character, but she had a different character later on too. That was
she did.
I don't know if it could be called a main character or not, but
right.
But interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. We all did. We all ended up. And this may attest to the longevity of this campaign, because we all ended up taking on secondary characters, except for the two GMs. Although Tom did actually swap out his PC for a completely different PC, and the first PC he never returned to. So that's a little bit different. But the rest of us, we had two player characters that we would alternate between when we felt like we wanted to. And that helped. I think, getting a break from our main PCs was helpful in extending the life of this game. And so we will have those discussions when our alternate characters come into the story. You can ask those questions about who I preferred. All right. So anyway, back to the thrilling episode 1. So speaking of Kara Almud arrived at the New Year's celebration with her escort, renowned Great White Hunter Sir Heathcliff Quentin Merriweather III, son of one of the Empire Club's founding members and great-grandson of the 11th Earl of Mar. Also in attendance was Galahad, disinherited munitions heir Benedict Grey, and such distinguished senior members of the Empire Club as Sherlock Holmes and Philo Vance. Juliet planned to steal the pharaoh's sarcophagus through a trapdoor and lower it down to a waiting team of agents at midnight. But when midnight came, she found the dead body of the exhibit's chief Egyptologist, and the trapdoor was wide open. Now, I'll pause here. Heathcliff, or Cliff, as Kara called him, was my character, and as I mentioned in episode 0, the name came in part as a pun on the word cliffhanger, but it also was inspired by the character Heathcliff from Emily Bronte's novel Wuthering Heights. And so, the cliffhanger being a trope of the round-robin GMing convention for this game between Tom and you, that sort of cinched the deal. Heathcliff, as you notice from this summary, is a legacy member of the Empire Club. And you may recall from episode 0, I mentioned when I'm reading the timeline of his life, he joins the Empire Club at 19. He's only gone to college. He hasn't really begun his life of adventure. So that was purposeful. It meant that Heathcliff didn't actually earn his membership. It was hereditary, although over the course of the campaign, he certainly, and even before the campaign started, his backstory after joining the Empire Club, he certainly ended up being a worthy member of the club by any metric. And also, it's actually historically inaccurate, historically impossible, indeed, for him to have been the great-grandson of the 11th Earl of Mar, is that historical figure lived in the 15th century, and, this was taking place in 1934, but I added that as an homage to the Genesis prog rock song 11th Earl of Mar from their 1976 album Wind and Wuthering, the title of that album, as well as the final song on the album, also being inspired by Bronte's Wuthering Heights. But I just Pulp, you're not supposed to pay too much attention to detail when it comes to Pulp. It was like your rhetorical question in episode 0. How did the white tiger that he was hunting get to Borneo? Yeah. It's like, don't think about it's just there are white tigers all over the world. All right, he just goes around hunting white.
I always pictured your character though as a certain actor, not an actor, cartoon character. That I don't mean to cast aspersions on the character, saying,
no.
But there was a cartoon character from a group of cartoons, Fractured Fairy Tales.
Oh yeah, Fractured Fairy Tales.
Right, and I think there was another. It was Mr. Peabody.
And
Sherman.
Mr. Peabody and Herman, right?
But they always had these shorts of the Major, who would sit there with the globe next to him.
Yes.
And the his friends sitting there listening to his stories that were obviously overblown.
Yes.
It takes us to the jungles of Africa. But,
right. Well, you're spot on, because you may recall one of the things I used to do when I played Heathcliff is anytime I would recount something from the past, I would say it like this, and I would like the first sentence was, "There we were in the veldt," and that came directly from the Colonel from those cartoons you're talking about. So yeah,
Major, what did you do? Whatever did you do?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that was a common trope. The whole Great White Hunter trope was.
But I always imagined that for some reason when you were with the character, that and obviously Van Pelt, even though he was a villain from Jumanji.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And that was another direct inspiration on the Great White. In fact, that might have been the singular inspiration for the image that I had in my head when we were coming up with character concepts. And I thought, oh, that Great White Hunter from Jumanji, that's a good pulp trope. And then, when I started to act out the character, I was portraying the Major from the cartoon and so forth.
You also got the I'm British kind of, we rule the world,
yes.
And that type of, these upstart Americans come in and think they know everything. They know nothing. And your character really picked up on that kind of self bravado,
right. That British pride. Yeah, and I should clarify something that we said in episode 0. I don't want to give the audience the impression that we came up with the idea of the Empire Club. So the Empire Club actually came from Justice Inc., which was the Hero Games supplement for Pulp. There was a supplement to its original core rules, which were really designed for superhero games. And so we didn't have the supplement, but we knew of it, and we even apparently knew what was in it. We knew about there was this Empire Club campaign setting, and so we just yanked that. We took the Empire Club, but when we talked in episode 0 about the race between the New York founding members and the London founding members to establish the first chapter house, that we came up with on our own. And everything else, the idea of a chapter house in every major city, that was, I think, our idea. Or if it was also in the Justice Inc. supplement, that's just a coincidence, because I'm pretty sure that we were brainstorming and came up with that idea. So I like to think that Heathcliff was perhaps the son of one of the British founding members who lost out on that race and ended up establishing the London chapter house second.
Lower himself to come to the American office, the American
right.
Club.
So that's why he kind of had a chip on his shoulder a little bit. That and just being a British imperialist. So anyway, and Benedict Grey actually was Tom's character, not Benjamin Grey, as I had said in episode 0. I had forgotten that it was actually Benedict. And he was an NPC in this session because obviously Tom was GMing it. But Benedict would get the PC injection when you were taking the GM's screen and Tom was being a player. And so here's how Tom defined the character as written up eventually by me on the old Empire Club website on GeoCities, where we had a page dedicated to player character bios. And it said, disinherited heir to the Grey munitions fortune, Benedict has devoted his life to learning everything he can about unarmed combat, but specializes in Sinanju, the ancient Korean art in which any object can be used as a deadly projectile. Coarse and sometimes shockingly ruthless, Benedict nonetheless showed a strange sense of honor and adored the infamous and beautiful Juliette Dupont. And the biographical sketch goes on, but it contains spoilers, so it's sufficient to stop there for now. But we'll let the Benedict character unfold as our podcast continues. But there are two things I want to bring out about that. So while you were the two-fisted character who would throw punches, and you would use the fight skill, or what, I don't even remember what champions' skill sets were, but you would use that. And I used the bull rifle, or in close combat, I would use my sword cane. Juliette, she would sort of evade combat, and she would use sneak tactics. And Michelle's character, Mikara, she was more of the mentalist, so she would stand back and use mentalist abilities. So what Tom would have Benedict do was, he had projectile powers, but it wasn't a gun, because he was this disinherited heir of the gun fortune of his family, and he eschewed guns. But he still had this projectile talent where he would take anything, Sinanju he called it, and
right.
The ancient Korean art of throwing.
He may have gotten that, actually, although I think it is a real Korean martial art.
Yeah.
There's a pulp book. It's not set back in the 30s, but there's a character called Remo Williams.
Yes.
There was a film that they did, and that actually was his character do Sinanju.
There you go. That's right.
So, yeah.
Now that you say that I do remember that now, yeah. And wasn't there also a comic book character, Gambit, who could do that with cards? He could make cards deadly.
I don't know if that was Sinanju, but yeah, Gambit could throw just about anything and make it a weapon.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was on right around then, the kind of 90s, 2000s. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And the other point I wanted to bring out about Benedict was that Tom's character, Benedict Grey, and your character, Max Galahad, were both always fighting as rivals, and you had even bought this as a disadvantage, fighting as rivals for the affections of Juliette Dupont, which I thought was really clever. That was a good added character dynamic, and again, this is one of the elements that made this such a perfect storm of a game, because there were all of these undercurrents, like Michelle's character, my character, having this past romance that isn't, it isn't going on at the time, but they obviously still have feelings for each other. They're obviously still in love with each other. And then you and Tom and Jason are sort of doing this rivalry for Juliette's affections. It added a whole added layer to the storytelling that you don't often see in other campaigns. I
always thought of my character as the Superman and his as like the Batman. Yeah. Character. I was the big beefy character.
Right.
And not very well. Superman's not stupid, but he's not the master detective that Batman is.
Correct.
But then Batman, who's incredibly a good martial artist and a good detective. So I think that they balance each other really well. I liked it.
I thought they did.
Yeah.
All right. So a chase ensued in the catacombs below the museum. Kara received mysterious psychic visions of the unearthing of the sarcophagus and of an unspeakable ritual conducted when Orthos Ra was alive. Using his expert tracking skills, Lord Merryweather found some mysterious spores and some of the mummy's wrappings, which led him to the animated mummy just as it was about to claim the life of another Egyptologist. Now, these spores, it seems to me, was something that Tom may have been laying down for you, or perhaps that he intended to develop in subsequent episodes. But interestingly, neither you nor he seem to have pulled that thread, which was funny. And so this is bringing us to our cliffhanger. So before we get to that final to-be-continued moment, what were your thoughts at this point, being the end of the evening session, about where the story might go? Were the seedlings planted yet in your mind, or would you not give this any thought until the week between sessions? What went on?
And I think I attribute this to Dashiell Hammett, who I think said, if you're ever at a hold for not knowing where to go with the story, have somebody with a gun bust down the door and start firing. Just throw chaos in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think now the cliffhanger, I think he laid down the cliffhanger.
He did, yeah.
And I just used the chaos of the moment. I think I was thinking I'll just have to somehow scatter everybody, or have everybody start on a chase, which is what happened the next scene. Because obviously the villain's going to have to try to get away. We had I think we talked about this in one of other session, maybe in session 0, that we had the covering the dice saying I made it, but then the villain could say too late,
Right.
Which I attribute, by the way, to Hardy LaBelle.
That's right.
He came up with that.
He did.
Yeah. But yeah, so you needed some way to have the villain get away, and I think that's where I was going, is just to throw chaos or lean into the chaos and get everything kind of mixed up a little bit.
Yeah, I was not yet the other round robin GM in this game. It was still you, and it was you and Tom at the beginning, the first maybe score of sessions, perhaps. But I was watching you guys very intently. I didn't know that Tom was eventually going to leave the group and that I was going to step up as co-GM. But nevertheless, I was fascinated by this round robin GMing that you guys were doing. I had never seen it done before. I'd never even heard of it before, and I watched with great interest over the first dozen or the first 20 sessions. Well, all of the sessions. I always watched you guys with great interest to see how you played off of each other, and I thought you guys did it tremendously well. And I was learning. I often say, much to your embarrassment, that you taught me a lot of how to GM, and that the GM that people credit me as being today is largely because of you. Like, I learned at your feet, and this is one of the biggest things I learned. I really watched you guys, and so I obviously could not get into your heads, and I am curious, like, as we're approaching this last scene, and it's like closing in on 10 o'clock or whatever time we would end our Monday night sessions. We would all be looking at the clock. We knew we had a half hour left. We knew we had 15 minutes left. You knew this was going to be the scene where the cliffhanger was going to happen. Are you thinking at this point, what am I going to do with the story, or are you just living in the moment? Are you just playing Max Galahad, and are you just waiting for after we pack up and your subway ride home before you start to think about where you're going to go next?
I was thinking, what am I going to do with this? And I really had no idea at that point. I had to think about it, but I was trying to think, where am I going to take this?
Okay.
Or what have I gotten myself into? Now I have to take what he's done, and it wasn't necessarily supposed to be like taking it in a completely different direction. But we were supposed to do something with the cliffhanger, right. And my idea was to get that feeling of, well, they cheated. Because you saw him go over the cliff, in the car, but then suddenly they jumped out of the car before, we would have seen that. So they changed the cocky duty story.
Right, misery.
So I really didn't know what I was going to do at that point. I had to think about it, but I knew I was going to lean into the chaos of whatever he threw at us. So
right. Yeah. When I did end up eventually taking over the mantle as your co-GM, I did not give it any thought at all while the session was going on. I just immersed myself in playing Heathcliff, and I just let whatever cliffhanger was going to happen. And then on the subway ride home, if we were not playing at my house, then I would start thinking, all right, what am I going to do next week? Where can I go with this? So, yeah, I tried not to think about it in the moment, but It was fun. It was a fun experience to do that. So I liked the way you guys did the cliffhanger. So the men engaged the creature, who tossed them around like rag dolls. When Max was knocked unconscious after discovering the unwrapped remains of Orthos Ra, the group began to wonder who was really behind this foul play.